Hello, and welcome to Creepycore and Folklore, the show about creatures, encounters, old tales, and myths. I'm your host, Iona Wayland, a dark fantasy author, mental health professional, and overall curious person. I want to join other spooky souls and hear about these unusual stories. Hello, spooky soul. Happy Halloween. I couldn't think of a better person to spend it with than you, and I'm really glad that I can kind of make this maybe I can make this a tradition, like a Halloween tradition. I had so many ideas when I realized that there was going to be an episode of Creepycore and Folklore coming out on Halloween that I was like, what can I do? There's so many options. So I decided to go with reading some scary stories around a campfire. That's definitely something that I love doing even to this day, and I thought, let's do that together. I wanted to read from that book, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, because it's really campy, and I also have distinct memories of being in elementary school and having certain stories really stick with me and make me really uncomfortable. So I was going to do that, but then I was like, well, no, I don't think I'm allowed to read like books on here. Instead, I need to read more like public information or public articles, things like that. So then I was like, oh, you know what's a really creepy site and that can get off the rails pretty easily is Reddit. And I don't know if you've ventured into Reddit and that forum landscape, but it's the wild west of the internet, in my opinion. And there's some really talented, like, creepy stories, personal accounts, and then also like fictional stories that people upload in kind of like a creepypasta-esque way. I'll of course make sure to include the different resources and original poster sources in the show notes if you're curious about what the resources are, as well as some of the articles that collected these sources together and compiled them. So I'm going to read some of the personal accounts, and I tried to find some of the creepiest ones that you've probably heard of already if you're a Redditor. If you adventure into the creepy side of Reddit, and if you haven't, then let me tell you some tales of some firsthand accounts. And then at the very end, we're going to do like a little protection spell for the change in season and then for protection while the veil is thin tonight. So join me around the campfire. Get comfy, get cozy, and enjoy some of these chilling tales. These are some scary ghost stories from Reddit. This one's called It Wasn't a Little Girl. I was camping with my husband and his family at a small remote lake in New Mexico. There were about 10 people in our group and another group of 6 people in the next campsite. It was nighttime and both groups were doing typical activities, making s'mores, having a few drinks, and telling stories, when we all heard what sounded like a little girl yelling out for help. Neither group had children with them, but we were all positive we were hearing a little girl and decided to search the area we heard the noises from together. There was a field behind our campsites, and we all saw a very tall, pure white figure standing maybe 100 feet away from us in the field, making the noises. We all agreed this thing looked maybe 6 feet tall, skinny, and white as can be. We made our way closer to investigate, but whatever it was, what we saw started backing off as we got closer, and it disappeared into the trees. All night we continued to hear a little girl calling for help as we tried to sleep. Ooh. I don't know what entity that is. I am very curious to know. It's really upsetting. It kind of reminds me of like a will-o'-the-wisp. It was like kind of leading them off somewhere. especially because as they got closer, it kind of took them away farther and farther, and they had to try and ignore it. Oh man, I already have goosebumps. It's so funny. I'm like, I'm gonna have a Creepycore and Folklore podcast, since like I was not cut out for this. The scariest of cats. Oh man, we're only on story 1. Okay, here's another one. This is called The Walking Dead. I'm a psychiatric nurse, and early in my career, I worked at a residential mental health facility. One of our residents was an elective mute, which means that he didn't/wouldn't/couldn't talk, but there were no medical reasons as to why. He had spoken earlier in his life and in fact seemed quite, quote, normal back then, with the exception of being close to 7 feet tall. He had been raised in the Deep South and joined the military when he was 19, but one night he vanished. He was declared AWOL, and eventually he was declared missing and dead. 10 years later, a 7-foot-tall man walked into a VA hospital emergency room in my part of the Midwest and said to the receptionist, "My name is Marion Duchesne," not the real name, "and I've been dead for 10 years. Those were the last words he ever spoke. He was covered with dust, and he was wearing the same clothes he'd been reported to be wearing the night he vanished. His social security number had not been used, and he had no identification on his person. However, they were able to identify him, I guess via fingerprints. The family was notified, but they said they had already grieved their lost man, and that whomever was claiming to be him simply could not be. They demanded not to be contacted again. Marion paced all day, every day, moving his mouth that looked like talking or muttering, but no sound came out. He had an unnerving habit of throwing his head back with his mouth wide open, as if he were laughing heartily, but not even a breath could be heard. If I talked to him, he appeared to listen, periodically throwing his head back in that laughter-mimicking way of his. Various medications were tried, but they did not affect him either positively or negatively. Occupational therapy did nothing because Marion would just grin, and unless told to stay put, he'd get up and start pacing again. On my last day at the job, the last thing I saw was Marion pacing in the parking lot, throwing his head back to laugh. Later, I wondered if all along I'd been dealing with a ghost. All these years later, I still don't know. I haven't pre-read these stories beforehand, but I always like to be conscientious and intentional when reading stories when there's an overlap with potential mental illness, because I don't want to create a sensationalization around mental illness, because that could be related to being taken prisoner or being lost and then the aftermath of that. So I think that's really important just to note that that could be part of how he's coping with losing 10 years of his life. This next one is called The Unrest Stop. I was driving across country with my mom and sister when I was 16, and my sister was 20. It was late, but we were well rested still and alert. We were driving along an interstate and needed gas and a bathroom break, so we stopped at the only rest stop in 200 miles. There was a van full of teenagers on a road trip at the gas station, as well as a small gray car parked at the pump in front of us, with two young men standing still outside of it. When we got there, everything felt wrong. We'd been on the road for days and seen many rest stops at night, and had never been afraid until then. My mom and sister went inside, and I stayed in the car. I heard the teenagers say they were creeped out and couldn't get the pump to work, and they left in a hurry. I was watching the car in front of us, and the two men had not moved at all, not an inch. They weren't talking, they weren't on phones, they were just standing there, still as stone. My sister and mom came running back out to the car, and when they got in, the two men slowly turned to look at us, while not moving or pivoting the rest of their bodies. And I swear to fucking shit, we all saw the same thing. They had eyes dark as pitch and empty. Truly empty. Not black, not reflecting any light at all. Just a void. We sped out of there and didn't stop until we were in the next city. The worst thing about the entire experience, we couldn't find the place on any map. We knew exactly which spot on the interstate to look, and we couldn't find it on Google Maps or any paper map we had. Oh my God, I'm covered in goosebumps. We even asked locals about the creepy gas station out on the stretch of road and got only confused looks. We've traveled on that interstate since, and there's no rest stop. Oh my goodness, they found a liminal space, but like a horrific liminal space, not a fun between. Ooh, the void eyes. Because at first I was like, oh, do they just have dark eyes? Because that's like rude. Because like there's lots of people with dark eyes, and like glittering dark eyes are just gorgeous. But just having like cosmic interstellar voids for eye sockets is like not great. I think it's interesting too that they had that experience with these two teenagers too. Like it was like a multi-human experience. Oh, I don't like that one bit. That's not the first time I've heard of a story where someone's traveling and like while they're traveling they hit like a pocket that isn't there, like isn't noticeable on maps, and that people don't know what they're talking about. Okay, the next one's called It Came For Us in the Graveyard. We were driving my friend's really old beat up Subaru through a massive graveyard. I already love this because I finally got my car back. Her name's Marigold. This is not the story. This is my own story. From my car wreck. I finally got her back. She's still unfortunately not totally put together because I got her back and I was like, yay. And then realized that there was a whole chunk that hadn't been fixed correctly. And I was like, oh no. It had been like almost 2 months since I had my car. But my Marigold is a Subaru and I love her very much. But she needs to go back to the shop again since that car wreck. But anyway, so as soon as I saw Subaru, I went into a caveat. Back to the story. We were driving my friend's really old beat up Subaru through a massive graveyard. We stopped and walked down a hill and came across a little pond. There was someone sitting on a rock on the other side of the pond. The figure was all black and we couldn't make out any features other than the fact it looked like a man who was wearing some old style top hat. We stupidly waved and shouted hi. He didn't show any acknowledgement and continued sitting still on the rock. All of a sudden, he jumped to his feet, started running to us on the water, and then vanished in thin water about halfway on the pond. I think they meant in thin air. But wow, my friend and I screamed and ran back to the car. The car wouldn't start, and we heard something banging on the back of the car. It wasn't a constant bang, but every few seconds or so we'd hear it. Nobody was outside from what we could see in the dark, but something was making a noise on the car. I opened my phone and started dialing my mom to come give us a boost, but I had no service. None of us had any cell service. The next 30 minutes were spent trying to get the car started. No banging was heard afterwards, but we felt this heavy pressure around us. Finally, the car started and she hit the pedal to the metal. We sped out of the graveyard so fast. Immediately crossing the gates, all of our phones regained cell service. One thing I know for certain is that someone or something was out there, and it was not an animal or a human. Yeah, the dark figure or like the black silhouette figure, especially with like the old-timey garb or like the outline of the old-timey attire, is really a common thing I've read about when it comes to ghosts. This next one's called It Was Good to See an Old Friend. When I was 37, I went to my high school reunion. I flew into the nearest airport and rented a car. The distance was about 35 miles through a very rural and almost abandoned part of the country. About 3 miles outside of town, I see someone on the side of the road flagging me down. It turned out that it was one of the guys I had attended school with. Jim, not his real name, gets in the car and we start talking. I had not seen him in 20 years, and he still looked the same, maybe a little older. We get to town and I ask him if he wants to come to the VFW. Oh my gosh, the VFW. Sorry, we have so many VFWs from where I'm from. The VFW is where it's at. Wow. Okay. Sorry. That was like a little nostalgic. Okay. So we get to town and I ask him if he wants to come to the VFW and have a drink. He says, no, just take me home. Jim's parents had lived only a few blocks from my grandmother's house, and I turned in that direction, but he said to take him to the outskirts of town. There was a mobile home park out there, and I figured that is where he lived. When we reached the end of the turn, he said, "Just drop me off here. It was good to see you again," and he walks off into the night. I go to the VFW, met some of my old classmates. We start to talk. As we're talking about who's coming to the reunion, I mentioned that I had just picked up Jim up 3 miles east of town and had dropped him off. Everyone gets quiet. Even the guy singing karaoke stops and lays down the mic. My cousin goes white as a new t-shirt. "Barb, Jim died on that curve 8 years ago. Rolled his car. We were all at his funeral," I was told. I started to feel really dizzy, and I went out to the car to take some deep breaths. There on the seat is the local newspaper, printed 8 years previous, containing Jim's obituary. I still have the paper. Oh. That's kind of sweet. It's kind of sad. Yeah. Wow, that one kind of got to me a little bit. Yeah. That was kind of nice that she got to see an old friend like that. That was kind of sweet. Whew. I didn't think any of these would make me tear up. Oh my goodness. Okay. The next one's called Death Came for Him. I was standing in my parents' room talking to my very sick dad at the time. He was dying of stage 4 esophageal cancer. I got the feeling something was behind me. I looked toward the doorway to the living room, and something about 4'6" and fully black is peeking around the corner with its hands on the door frame. I ran toward it, and it slipped around the door. When I got outside the doorway, there was nothing. My dad was completely confused when I stepped back inside the room when I tell him. People who stayed at my house in my dad's final days claimed to have seen it. My mom saw the figure on multiple occasions with multiple places until he passed away. We haven't seen it since. That's really odd. I don't know if I've ever seen like something that sounds pretty short, like 4'6", and then kind of like whenever I hear fully black figure, I'm not thinking skin tone. I'm thinking of like a silhouette or shadow type of figure. So it makes me wonder what that one was. I wonder if it was something that was like curious about what was going on or was keeping an eye out for the dad. That's really interesting. The next one is called My Mother Attracted Evil. After my parents' divorce, when I was a teenager, I lived with my mother. I experienced lots of paranormal happenings. Several times when I was reading in my bed, the room would start to feel icy. Next, it would feel as if something/somebody that hated me was staring at me. When I got that feeling, I would leave the room and come back an hour later. Sometimes during the day, I would see a shadow figure sneaking along my bedroom walls. Something in the flat was pretending to be my dog. I went into my room and heard a deep growl from under the bed. My dog wasn't capable of making a noise that deep. It sounded like either a really big dog or a man doing his best dog impersonation. Other times, my dog would whimper and pace in the room next to mine, but wouldn't come in when called, as if he was afraid of something in the hallway. When I moved in with my father, the paranormal activity stopped. Ooh. That one reminds me of the Bell Witch. Oh, that creeps me out. No. Every single one of these, I'm going to be like, that creeps me out every single time. I really want to know if you've experienced something similar to any of these stories that I'm reading. Like, there's a bunch that I have collected, and I really want to know if there's any overlap to your own experiences, or if it, like, uncovers any memories of like old neighbors or old childhood friends or even current family members or friends having these kinds of experiences. The next one is called Evicted by a Ghost. Shortly after college, I got married. We immediately moved into a basement apartment because that's all that was available within our budget. This place had a poltergeist, and my wife was terrified. Whatever resided there with us made it clear it wanted to live alone. Dishes, glasses, and other items would fly off the shelf. My wife was hit several times. There was always an ominous feeling like we were being watched. At night, when we walked through the apartment in the dark, there would be insanely bright flashes of light that would illuminate the entire room. One night, while we were going to bed, as soon as my wife and I walked into the bedroom, we heard a voice from nowhere say, insert my name, move. My wife looked at me. I looked at her. I said loudly, "You've got it, bud." We moved out 2 days later and stayed with family. The old lady who owned the place died a few months later, and the house was torn down. It is still an empty lot to this day, nothing but grass and a tree. I still drive it every now and again. That's exactly, it's like, you need to move, like move out. I'd be like, all right, that's fine. Say no more. I love that the poltergeist was like clearly passive aggression, like you're not picking up my hints. So I'm just going to be plain with you. You need to move out. This next one's called The Demon's Room. I worked as a forensic nurse in a hospital's lockup unit. We had one older lady who swore she was being haunted and abused by a demon she would call Tiberius. So many crazy things happened while she was on the unit. We'd go into the room, do normal care, leave, and seconds later she'd start screaming bloody murder. We'd run into the room to find her looking like she'd been in a fight with a boxing champ. Bloody lip, black eye, markings all over her body. No one ever saw her doing this stuff to herself. Things would get moved around the room by themselves. At one point she was in protective restraints because the doctor thought she was hurting herself. There was no way she could have moved or done anything to herself while in these restraints, but new marks would always appear, or her tray/cart would be across the room. The room was secure so that there was no way someone else was doing this. When we asked her questions, she'd just say it was Tiberius. After she was discharged, we always had trouble with that room. If there was going to be a rapid response or code, it happened in that room. One night, a guard reported lights blinking on and off. It was that room. I wonder what made a particular angry, I guess spirit it sounds like, or something, be there. And I also wonder why she picked the name Tiberius. Now I'm going to do my annoying thing where like I look up the name meanings. I mean, other than being Tiberius Caesar Augustus, the second Roman emperor, which I'm pretty sure was not the same one. It's a Latin derivative, meaning like coming from the river of Tiber. So, I don't know. That one's mysterious. I don't know where she got that name. So these next few are going to be about people sharing unexplained things that happened to them. So this first one is called The Mysterious Baby Prince. On cold days inside your car, you can breathe on the window and draw on the glass. I got in my car, and as I look at the windshield, I see a few small baby hands. I thought it was strange someone would let a baby play on my car's windshield. I had an urge to touch the baby prints, and as I touched it, I wiped away the handprints. The handprints were made from inside my locked car. The next one is the doppelganger. I was probably about 16 to 17, and I had just gotten home from high school. My brother was in the kitchen making a ruckus, so I started that way. As I passed by his bedroom, I saw my mom in there, sitting on his bed with the lights off, facing away from me and towards the wall. I stopped and stood in the doorway and asked if she was okay and what she was doing. She said really slowly, "Just sitting. Come here. I need to talk to you." I took about a half step into the room when I heard my mom yelling for me in the kitchen and then saw her setting the table. I looked back to the bedroom and there was nothing there. Ugh. I don't think I ever went back into that room by myself again, even 10 years later. Ew. That happened once to me where my sister, came in, like, this is like not the doppelganger story, but this is like my sister came in to wake me up, and like, so granted, this could have been a dream and stuff. Like, this one has a lot, like, it wasn't like I was coming home from school like this original poster was talking about. Like, I like was asleep. It's the morning. I'm a total bear in the morning. It's like a mess. So she came in, and I think I was in middle school, and she was like, hey, you're late getting up. You need to get up. And I was like, okay. And she was already dressed and ready to go. And like, she was wearing her outfit for the day and everything. And I got up and I was like, thanks for getting me. Sorry, I slept through my alarm. And so like, and she's always been a morning person, so that was not surprising. So I got ready and I came out, and like, no one else was awake yet. I was like, what the hell? And so like, I like was eating cereal, and my sister came out, and she was like in her pajamas, and I was like, what? Why did you change into your pajamas? She's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, you just came in and woke me up, and you're wearing like your outfit for the day already, and like, what are you doing? Why would you change back into your pajamas? And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I just woke up. Like, I don't need this today, because she's a sassy lady. And so she went in and changed, and she changed into the same outfit that she had like woken me up in, and I hadn't told her what she was wearing. So maybe that's more of like a glitch in the Matrix type of thing. I don't know. That I also had another glitch in the Matrix thing where like I was calling people to cancel like a session time. I forget why. Something like, I'm just making up a reason. I honestly don't remember. It was something to do with like, maybe I had to go to a meeting or a doctor's appointment or something. Like, I'm totally making this up. Like, oh, I have to cancel because I'm going to a doctor's appointment. And I called this one person, and she was like, oh yeah, I already know. And I was like, what? I'm just calling you now. And she's like, no, you already talked to me, and here's the new appointment time. And I was like, yeah, I was wondering if you could switch to that. And she's like, yeah, I already talked to you. Like, yeah, we can switch to that time. And I was like, oh, wow, sorry, I must have like lost my head. And she's like, yeah, you have to take it off because you're going to a doctor's appointment. I'm like, yeah, oh my gosh, how'd you know that? She's like, I swear we've already talked. I'm like, okay, just like, you know, I try to laugh it off and be like, don't mind my hair brain. Like, let me just switch it. So I switched it and I put in the new session time, but I never changed the session time in my calendar, and I looked at my phone, and I had in my phone the call record never showed that I had talked to her before. So I'm pretty sure I like matrix shifted or something, and hopefully my multiverse self wasn't screwed over by me accidentally calling in that multiverse setting. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all. I am not as good at telling the campfire stories myself as I am at reading other people's. This next one's called The Time Blip. Driving from Northern California to Southern California through the middle of the night about a decade ago, I was tired, and the scenery along the freeway, though the Central Valley isn't very interesting. I remember passing an old silo, looking at my car clock, and it was 3:17 in the morning. Drove some more, passed a power line, and it was 3:21. I blinked, shuffled in my seat, and passed that same old silo, and it was back to 3:17. I was in disbelief. I just stared at my clock for a few moments. Drove a little bit more, passed the same power line at 3:21. Don't know why or how, but I went backwards about 4 minutes. Never experienced anything similar or since. I had a friend that had that happen to them once, so they say, where they like repeated like just a couple minutes where it just kind of like looped. I find that very interesting. I really don't know about like Matrix, multiverse stuff very much, clearly. But I always find that really interesting when people notice a time warp. And I did say time warp on purpose, and I hope that that song gets stuck in your head. Let's do the time warp again. If you know, you know. I won't sing anymore, don't worry. This next one is called The Person Who Got a Redo. I died. I saw it. I lived it. Either it was another world with a version of me that died I saw, or I'm going crazy. But I died. We had a pep rally in school, and after it was finished, we had to go back to class. Well, my friend and I were not into that, so we wanted to go across the street to Sonic. Well, I remember walking with him, and he dropped something, so I went across the street first. I just saw a red Tahoe heading right for me, and I got hit. I remember everything. I remember gasping for air. I remember waking up and sleeping again. Then nothing. All of a sudden, I was back in the stadium again, and the exact same words came out of the principal's mouth. My friend wanted to go to Sonic, but I was freaking out. I thought it had to be a dream, so I went with him just to see what would happen. He dropped his stuff again, and I waited. To my horror, that same red Tahoe showed up. I told him that I'm going back to school. I ain't dying again. I can still see the other version of me on that street, just messed up, not even moving. That's really chilling. That's really messed up. Oh, I'm so sorry that person had to go through seeing themselves like that. That's really, really scary. This one's called The Person Who Straight Up Astral Projected. This happened around 1991. It's the middle of the night. I'm standing in my sister's living room, and it must be a full moon, because even though it's around 1 a.m. and the lights are off, I can see clearly. There's a mixing bowl with popcorn kernels in the bottom on the floor, in the front of the TV, and some rental VHSs in a pile nearby. I hear a noise and turn around to see my sister's normally very friendly Labrador Retriever, looking like Cujo, fangs bared, snarling, hackles raised. Suddenly there's a bright flash of light, and I wake up like I hit the bed from a great height. I think that was a weird dream. Eventually, I fall back to sleep, and in the morning I call my sister, planning to tell her the story. But she preempts me by telling me about the weird thing that happened in the night. They woke up to the sound of the dog snarling at about 1 a.m. Her husband thought there was a prowler in the house, got a gun, and went to find the dog. She was standing in the living room, snarling at the middle of the room. He couldn't see anyone, so he flipped on the light. No one was there. The dog instantly stopped snarling and walked to her bed like nothing had happened. He checked the property and went back to bed. We talked a bit, and I found out they watched some rental movies, and, of course, we had popcorn. Why? I think that one's fun. They accidentally spooked each other. Also, that was a very good dog to be like, wait a minute. You're allowed to visit, but like not in this way. This is creepy. The next one is called The Attic Ghost. I used to live in a house that was built on old farmland. Oh boy, this is already going to speak to my soul. I can feel it. I slept in a bedroom that had no door, except for the door leading up to the attic. Yep. Which had a little sliding lock on it. Every single night, I'd close the door and lock it. The attic frequently had birds and such get into it, and I didn't feel like having them fly out. Except every single morning, it'd be unlocked and slightly ajar. During the night, I'd wake up and have sleep paralysis. It was very frequent, and I got used to it. During said sleep paralysis, a figure would open up the closet and slip out. All black, sort of shadowy, and wearing what I can only describe as a farmer's hat. It'd stare at me for a moment, just stare. Sometimes it'd take a step over before turning and walking out of the entrance to my bedroom, which lacked a door, but I had set up some beads. They'd knock together. I can still hear it to this day. I had always been told I had an overactive imagination. I never spoke it to my parents or family since they'd probably make fun of it. One summer, my cousin came to visit. She took over my room since my family thought she deserved a larger room for whatever reason. I love the undercurrent of like jealousy right now. She came down for breakfast in the morning, white as a sheet, and said I could have my room back. When my mother asked why, she told her she had sleep paralysis and saw basically what I had. I'd never spoken to her of this. Years later, once we had moved out of the house, my mother told me something. Her bedroom was on the same hallway as mine, and she always slept with the door open. She told me some nights she'd wake up just to see a figure pass by the bedroom quickly. I don't really know if it was a shared delusion or what, but it still scares me to this day. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do like maybe a bonus episode or something like that about the woman in the farmhouse attic where my family's farm. Oh my goodness, she needed things a particular way, or she would like throw stuff down the attic steps and like bang around. It was awful. She was just a very particular lady. I'll have to do that, but what this original poster was talking about definitely reminds me of that same feel of like, this is farming country and this is a person. I don't know why so many like ghosts end up in the attic, but like this is a person who used to work here or live here, and then they kind of like have their usual route that they walk every night. It's so odd. The ghost story that's actually really sweet. Aw, I always like this one. That's the title of the next one. Okay. It says, I was putting my daughter to bed and she was talking about her godmother because we were reading a book that her godmother had gotten her. Her godmother died in 2019 of breast cancer. She was my very best friend, more like a sister, and she doted on my daughter. Oh my God, this is already going to get to me. We are reminiscing about her, and my daughter's twinkle lights she has on her ceiling start going off. They have multiple settings, and they are on the rainbow setting. Not too weird. Maybe they have a short or something. I go to turn them off. They aren't plugged in. Ooh. I figured it's my friend saying hi. Aw, she loved rainbows. This is so cute. I'm feeling very sentimental today. Oh, this is so sweet. I'm not superstitious, but she promised to stick around and haunt us. Oh my goodness, my heart. I find it comforting. Those lights still go off every now and then. Oh my goodness, that's so sweet. The next one is the unwanted music. When I was in high school, I would always be the first to arrive home out of my family, having the entire house to myself. My bedroom is upstairs, and one day when I got home from school, I placed my bag away and started up the stairs. About halfway, I stopped because I thought I heard something coming from upstairs, so I stayed and listened. I heard a very slow rendition of the melody from Ring Around the Rosie, crystal clear, coming from my bedroom. I was 100% sure I was the only one home, and I had absolutely no device that could be playing a music unprompted, especially Ring Around the Rosie. I froze in fear and listened for about 15 seconds to make sure I was really hearing it, which I was. I just turned back down the steps and waited around in the living room for my family to get home before I went back upstairs. I went in my room a few hours later and there was nothing out of the ordinary. I don't like that. So on the one hand, I do like when people remix music to sound slower or muffled. I think that's because sometimes when I don't know if it's my neurodivergence or if all brains are like this or lots of brains are like this, but I often have some sort of song stuck in my head. I know I joke about it, but it's like always repeating in there. And I almost had to like work on teaching my brain how to turn it down. And so what'll happen is I'll be working on tasks or doing something or going about my day, and then my brain will kind of muffle it. And that's how I'm able to kind of like have the quote internal music like playing while I'm doing my stuff. It took a lot of practice, but I'm able to do it now. So then when I hear remixes of like slowed down or muffled music, I'm like, wow, cool. Maybe that composer or DJ kind of has a similar brain idea as me, and they visualize, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right word to use right now, but music a similar way where they can like muffle it, slow it down, like alter it in that kind of way. What I think is very ominous is that, well, like obviously this isn't inside their brain and this isn't a remix. This is just playing like out of what? I don't know. And then Ring Around the Rosie, I'm not sure if you know this. You probably already do, but I remember learning that Ring Around the Rosie is from like it's like a children's song about like the symptoms of the bubonic plague, which was like a really horrific plague that killed a lot of people back in the day. And then the doctors garb from that time. I don't know why I'm saying garb so much today. I'm feeling like not only am I sentimental, but I'm just feeling like old timesy. But they like looked like those bird people. I don't know. Ooh. So it's like plague music that's slowed down and messed up coming from the walls, I guess, of your room. I would feel very uncomfortable with that. The next one is called The Mist. When I was about 5, I was going down the stairs of my house when suddenly there was some sort of mist in front of me. It had what I can only assume were eyes, and all the colors from the room were being pulled into individual strands, then sucked into these, quote, eyes like a black hole. This is another black hole eyes thing. I screamed and it disappeared through the wall to the other side of the house where my younger brother was. He screamed shortly after I did. My mom was near to him, so she went to him first. When I got into the room where he was really scared and he kept on saying, "The eyes, the rainbow eyes." We hadn't talked, so he didn't know what I had just seen. My parents knew a priest, so they brought him over and he did some sort of blessing. We never had any issues after that. It was definitely very creepy. Oh my gosh, definitely as someone who was raised a particular way with a particular religion, like calling on the priest to fix something can absolutely help. So, especially if that's part of your religion. So I'm glad that they did something that made them feel safe. I wouldn't know what else to do in that situation either. I've never heard of something like that before, ever. Like sucking things into those voids, that's really creepy. I don't know. I mean, it makes me think of black hole type of stuff, or like a wormhole. I don't know enough about like celestial stuff, like cosmic stuff, that I'm not sure. But that's really interesting. That might be something I need to look into, just because I've never heard of something like that before. The next one is called The Final Visit. I was living in Boston. I woke up at 3 a.m. Man, these 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. things are like total witching hour, I have to say. Okay, sorry. Back to the story. Okay. I woke up at 3 a.m. or so by my cat. Okay, of course. Jumping up on my bed and curling in between my calf muscles and going to sleep. My cat would do this every night since I was 5 years old. That was his spot. It was something I was very familiar with. Thing is, my cat was living with my parents on the West Coast, so I couldn't understand what the hell I just felt, but I knew it was my cat. I just figured I was dreaming. Got a call from my parents the following morning. Oh no. That my cat died around midnight the previous night. 3 hours behind since I was on the East Coast. Guess that was my cat traveling to Boston to come see me one last time. Oh. Why am I crying so much? Clearly these visits from people who have passed are really like getting to me. It's very sweet. I had something similar happen with a cat that passed away too. And then sometimes I dream about animals that have passed. That's really cute. That's really cute. Okay, so the next one is called The Prophetic Dream. I used to have a recurring dream as a teenager every night for months. I was sitting at a table on the patio of a restaurant. I was out there alone waiting for my food. A homeless man comes up to the other side of the patio and asks for change. I'm digging in my wallet for a couple dollars, and then I hear tires screech and look up to see a crash in an intersection near the restaurant. I run out there to see if I can help, and as I run into the road, I get hit by a car and wake up at the impact. After a while, the dream stopped, and I put it out of my mind. Fast forward to me being 28 and sitting at an On the Border. I guess On the Border is a place to eat. On the patio, waiting for my food. A homeless guy comes walking past the restaurant but doesn't stop and ask for change. It makes me think about that dream though, and I start to feel uneasy. Shortly after, I hear the tires screech and I see a wreck happen in the intersection near the restaurant. I begin to run out there but stop at the sidewalk and look out towards oncoming traffic, and there is an SUV not slowing down. She was on her phone and blew through the intersection completely unaware of what had just happened. Ran out and checked on the people. Everyone was fine. Ooh, okay, that was good. It was like a warning to look both ways. It's like, okay, there's like a driver that's not paying attention and will hurt you. And so like you really, like you can go out and help, but like you need to wait like 30 seconds for that texting driver to pass. Ooh, okay. The next one is the Are You Afraid of the Dark moment. Several years ago, I went home, turned on my PC, browsed the web for a bit, literally watched a video about The Matrix, then looked out of my window. Then I suddenly snapped awake sitting in my chair. I looked at my monitor to see that it had turned off. I thought, strange, I must have fallen asleep, and proceeded to move the mouse to wake my PC from sleep mode. It did not wake up. I was confused until I noticed that the power strip was not even plugged in. It had never been turned on in the first place. Ew. Ew, I hate it. The next one is called The Early Obituary. In college, I took a hard news / soft news journalism class where one of the assignments was to write an obituary for one of my grandparents. The professor told us to write it on a deceased grandparent, but if all of your grandparents were still alive, we had to choose one. What the hell? Why would... Okay, sorry. Sorry, that one took me a little by surprise at how angry I was. I don't know why he wouldn't just have you make somebody up, but whatever. In my case, all of my grandparents were alive. I procrastinated actually doing the assignment until the night before it was due because it seemed like a morbid assignment. Yeah, it does seem like a morbid assignment because it is a morbid assignment. I gave my mom a call and asked her for some basic biographical information about my maternal grandfather. As we were talking about my grandpa's career, my mom couldn't recall the name of one of the companies he worked at. She lectured me about waiting until the last minute to write the assignment because it was late, 10:30 p.m. my grandpa's time. When my mom called my grandpa, my grandma answered the phone in a panic. My grandma frantically explained that the paramedics had just arrived and were performing CPR on my grandpa because he had stopped breathing and lost consciousness. My mom was able to stay on the phone with my grandma until they took my grandpa to the hospital where he was declared dead. I'm so sorry. In the time my mom and I had been talking on the phone about my grandpa's obituary, he was dying. Still freaks me out when I think about the timing. Yeah, that's really scary. I'm really glad that it prompted the mom to be there for her mom during that really traumatic time. I'm still mad at the professor for making that assignment, though. I wish, there's so many other ways to make that assignment. So many other ways that aren't triggering. This next one is called The Shared Nightmare. My ex-wife and I were sleeping. There was a small sliver of light coming in through the window from a street light, so the room and bed were dimly visible. Our black Pomeranian was at the end of the bed, asleep. I dreamt that I woke up, reached down to pet him, and he turned into a glossy black bivalve / oyster thing, which opened up to reveal rows of gleaming glass teeth. I woke up to my ex backpedaling up the bed over the pillows toward the wall. I asked, "What's wrong?" She said, "What is that shiny black clam thing with teeth at the end of the bed? Where's the dog?" We had had the same nightmare at the same time. This still gives me chills. I want to know if there's a cryptid that's like clam related. I don't know if I've ever said such a thing in my life. The next one is called The Man with No Eyes. This past year, my family went on a sabbatical in another country. My daughter, 4, talks a lot about returning to our old house, and something she said recently gave me chills. Daughter, when we go back, can I sleep in mommy's room? Me, no backbone. Yes, sometimes we can have sleepovers. But don't you remember, you have a huge bed to sleep in your room. All your toys are in there, your stuffed animals. Daughter, but that guy, remember, I wake up at night because he's there with me. Me, mentally freaking out. What? No, I don't remember. What man? Daughter, he sits in the corner. He's all black. He doesn't talk. He just sits by me. Me, what does his face look like? Daughter, he has no eyes, but I think he has a mouth. Me, in shock. Well, you can definitely sleep in my room. What the fuck is that? Also, how is she so nonchalant about some terrifying thing in her room like this? That black figure with the no eyes and a mouth thing does sound oddly familiar to a watcher or something like that. Oh wait, no, watchers have eyes. Wow, that's legit in their name. I don't know, that one just sounds familiar to me. It is a really common child nightmare. I know I've worked with kids my whole life and to this day, and that's definitely a type of night terror that kids get. And that is really always creepy to hear about. The next one's called the teleportation. I was driving about 50 miles per hour and a car ran a stop sign on an on-ramp and pulled out right in front of me. I remember bracing for impact, and then I was about 300 yards down the highway and I saw the car at the ramp in my rear view just about to pull out. Ooh. That's cool. They were able to kind of like, yeah, no wonder it's called the teleportation. It's like, boop. Now you're safe. That's good that they were able to be transported to the side a little bit. The next one's called The Message. My friend Sarah was in a nightclub, drunk off her face, when she got an overwhelming urge to tell a total stranger that her leg hurts. Edit, it didn't. All a bit strange, she ignores it, but it doesn't stop, so she walks up to this guy and says, I know this is crazy, but I've got a huge urge to tell you my leg hurts. I know that's crazy. Again, I'm sorry. But he bursts into tears. Turns out his dad had just died, and they made a pact before that. If there was an afterlife, he would get a message to him saying a totally random phrase, so there could be no mistakes, which they decided was, I've hurt my leg. Aww. Aww. I like how it's like, it kind of, on the one hand, reminds me of SpongeBob, where there was that one fish that was always like, my leg. But I also like that his dad kind of had like a sense of humor and was like, I'm just going to have a random person tell you my leg hurts. That's so specific. It's so specific. It has to be this particular thing, you know? The next one's called The Premonition. 3 times in the last year, I've had a strong feeling to comment to someone about a part of their body. I've not done so because A, they're people I don't see often, and B, it would be weird. But a few weeks after, each one of those people were diagnosed with cancer, and the part of the body I felt I needed to comment on. If I get that feeling again, don't care who it is, I'm gonna say something. Yeah, some people just have like that uncanny ability to be able to be like, just get this checked out. I know I have like friends of mine who will just get that feeling. The next one's called The Mischievous Spirit. I had a very important document that I only ever kept in one place. I kept it in the top drawer of a small filing cabinet. I never moved it and would always see it in that drawer whenever I opened it for whatever reason. The day came that I needed it, and I didn't sweat it because I knew exactly where it was. Well, I'll be damned if it wasn't there. Cue panic attack. I tore that filing cabinet up. I removed everything and spread it out, flipped papers over, dug through envelopes, shook everything out, shined a flashlight all through the emptied cabinet in case it was somehow stuck to the sides. I mean, it was not there. I can assure you no one took it or was messing with me. I was so frustrated. I even looked through other parts of my house, but I knew it wouldn't be in any of those places, and it wasn't. I was intermittently going back to that dumb filing cabinet. No luck. Super irritated, I searched the rest of the house again, and on my way back downstairs, where my filing cabinet was, I called out in frustration, "Okay, bring it back." I don't know who I thought I was talking to because I was alone, but you guessed it. I found it in the top drawer of my filing cabinet where it should have been in the first place. I was relieved and totally freaked out. This person approaches ghosts how I approach ghosts. I know if you sign up for my email subscription, I give you access to this like bonus episode where I talk about my haunted house that I like recently sold. And I've only been living in my new house. It's still, they both are in Appalachia, but my old house was definitely haunted. This new house doesn't feel haunted at all. But in my old house, there's a part where I'm just like, that's enough. Like, I'm just like a ghost yeller. I don't ghost whisper. I ghost yell whenever I run into things like that. The next one's called The Spirit Who Was Listening. My wife was telling me a story about my brother-in-law and said the word fire. The smoke detector in the house immediately goes off. There was no smoke, no fire, nothing. She's convinced our house is haunted, and I kind of believe it too. Aw, well maybe that one was just like trying to protect you. I like that one. The next one's The Last Dad Joke. One night, a couple days after my dad passed away, the printer in the bedroom went off all on its own and only printed "Hi Dad" over and over in the middle of the night. The computer wasn't on, and the only way I could stop it was to unplug it from the wall. It wasn't a networked printer. My wife and I talked about it for a while and decided it was my dad making one last practical joke. I had chills thinking about it for years. Aw. That's annoying. That's definitely a dad thing to do. Quintessential dad moment. To have that last dad joke being like, hi dad, hi dad. That's really cute. Creepy but cute. The next one's called The Mirror Person. I was about 12 years old and woke up in the middle of the night needing to take a leak. I walked across the hall to the little bathroom, hit the lights, and was about to reach for the toilet when I glanced up and saw a face in the mirror. It was not my face. It was as if someone was on the other side, standing to the right, with their face right next to the glass staring at me. I only saw it for the briefest moment, but it is seared into my brain. I screamed and ran out of there to find my dad. Of course, my dad investigated, then calmed me down, or tried to. Eventually, we had a prayer session because I was so freaked out. Eventually, I must have gone back to sleep. Fast forward to my 30s, I'd forgotten all about the event. One night while visiting, my dad quietly brings it up. Remember that one time you saw a face in the mirror? It suddenly came back to me in a rush of memory, sending a chill down my spine. Yeah, I remember. Well, he said, I sometimes think about that night. He looked down at the floor with a serious expression. I saw it too. He went on to describe exactly what I'd seen. We have no idea what it was. Apparently, when he investigated, he saw it and had a freak out of his own. Apparently, the prayer session was as much for his own nerves as mine. I respect him for keeping that tidbit from me till at my 30s, but I kind of wish he'd never told me. Yeah, that's really freaky. For a while, I think this has more to do with something else, like other stuff that I personally was going through. But I know for a while, me and a couple of my friends have told me that this happened when they were kids as well. We were really afraid of like mirrors, and like things being on the other side of mirrors, and just like, oh, is there another world through there and stuff. And now that like I've been trying to learn how to scry a bit more, there's definitely, in my opinion, there does seem to be a whole other realm that we kind of don't know about in a spiritual kind of thought process here. So I think that's really scary, and I do think it's interesting that both this person and their dad saw something really weird in that mirror for that one particular moment. And I'm glad that they could tell each other that, even if that person didn't want their dad to tell them that. Okay, this next one's called The Lost Hours. I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighborhood, a few streets over. One night we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do the next morning, so just before 10 p.m., I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was just a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night, uneventful trip, but when I got home, my roommate was coming out the front door, coffee in hand, and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said he thought I was asleep since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I'd been and asked why he was going in to work at night. That's when he kind of laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute, and then he told me it was just after 5 a.m, and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I'd never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone, and sure enough, 5 something in the a.m. My roommate left for work. I paced in circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I just left. He groggily answered and confirmed I'd left at 10 the previous evening. Wow. This is so weird. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me chills to think about it all these years later. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't tired. No one could have slipped anything in either of the 2 Coors lights I'd had. No known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out, and nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened to that time. Interesting. Because I'm used to hearing about the one way. Like, I'm used to hearing about, like, oh, I thought I was gone for a certain amount of time. It turns out no time at all passed. I'm used to hearing about that, kind of like the previous story where that person kind of like relived 4 minutes or whatever. But I'm not used to hearing about this unless in like a clinical setting. Like in a clinical setting, sometimes I work with folks who have like dissociative disorders and stuff, and sometimes that can happen. But this doesn't sound like, this person said that they don't have like medical or mental illness type stuff that would cause that, at least that they know of. And they didn't feel like groggy or anything. That's really weird. Huh. That's something to think about, I guess, on this creepy night. So the next one's called The Offended Ghost. Had my laptop in my bed just before going to sleep, not plugged in on battery. Made an offhand comment on some website about how I wasn't scared of ghosts and didn't believe in them. Okay, there's your first mistake. Then I turned it off and went to sleep with the laptop beside me in bed. Next morning when I try to power it on, nothing happens, but the laptop feels unusually light. That's when I realized the battery had been physically removed and placed in the kitchen. I was alone in my apartment and do not have a history of sleepwalking at all. Oh no. I think that one's pretty self-explanatory. The next one's called The Room That Everyone Should Stay Out Of. In the same room of my old house, I have seen a convulsed face floating outside my window. Ew, we're off to a very terrible start here. My brother has also seen it too. I saw the same face over a number of periods, and it would do stuff like smile and float closer and further from the glass. Our youngest brother, a few years later, complained that he didn't want to play with the boy in his room anymore, as he was getting too much blood on his toys. It was the same room. Oh no. That's really sad. It's really scary too. The next one's The Doll and the Door. When I was 7 or 8, I would have a reoccurring nightmare, and one of my dolls came to life, played with me, and then would try to pull me into my closet with her. I'd follow her into the closet at first, but then she'd show me this little door at the back of the closet and my heart would start to race. Okay, pause for a second. This is giving me both Robert the Doll, where he would like drag like Jean, well, his name was Robert, but he would drag Jean into the closet and like beat him up and yell at him and stuff. And then it's also giving me Coraline vibes, where it's like, oh, follow me into this little room, and then follow me into this little room, and this is the doll world, and you can have buttons for eyes. It's like, this is really a scary nightmare for someone to have to go through, let alone a kid. So she'd show me this little door at the back of the closet, and my heart would start to race. I don't know what it was about the door, but I knew something bad would happen if I went through it. I'd start to struggle and try to pull away, but the doll was too strong and would start pulling me through the door. At this point in the dream, I'd always wake up screaming. The worst part was I had night terrors, so sometimes I'd wake up standing next to my closet. Every night before bed, I'd make my parents make sure there wasn't a little door at the back of my closet. There never was. Anyway, I was talking to my mom the other day, and this dream came up. I'm laughing about it and how ridiculously paranoid I was about dolls in that closet, but my mom gets really quiet. She tells me the creepy part of that dream wasn't the doll. It was the fact that there used to be a little door at the back of the closet. But when I was 1 year old, they remodeled the house and put a wall where the door used to be. There's no way I could have remembered that door, but years later I kept dreaming about it. None of my friends believe this story, but I swear it's true. Ooh. I have goosebumps again. That's, I do want to write a story at one point, about from a doll's perspective, but I don't want it to be malevolent like that. I did want it to be like a protective force in a child's life. That's really creepy. I always think, you know, I know I've already talked about it in the doll episode, but I always think like having dolls be have their own like sentience is really, really interesting. And so it does make me curious about what was behind that door and what was trying to draw her in, and like I'm really glad that she listened to her gut and never went in there in person or otherwise. The next one is the grandpa sighting. When I was 3, we were picking up my grandparents for a Sunday drive. I was sitting in the back seat on the passenger side. My grandfather was sitting in front of me. Suddenly, he keeled over, dead of a massive stroke. As I hustled my little sister and me out of the car and into my grandparents' store, I happened to look over my shoulder and plainly saw Grandpa walking down the street with 2 men. Both were dressed in suits, which made it all the more incongruous that Grandpa was wearing the same gray sweater and peaked hat he'd been wearing a moment before in the car. There was nothing particularly creepy about the experience except that I wouldn't accept that Grandpa was dead because, after all, I'd just seen him walking down the street. When our family doctor arrived to pronounce Grandpa dead, my mother asked me if I would take his word for it. We had a very good, trusting relationship with our doctor, so I said that I would. The doctor assured me that my grandfather had, in fact, died. But he was the only grown-up who didn't treat me like I was crazy. He listened respectfully as I told him what I had seen, and he suggested that maybe the men in the suits were angels. This seemed reasonable. Problem solved. But to this day, I can still see Grandpa walking down the street with those 2 men, and no matter what my parents tried to tell me, it wasn't just a guy who looked like Grandpa, coincidentally wearing the exact same clothes he'd been wearing in the car. It was him. This is really interesting. I know I had a very, very intense dream where my granddad, he's the granddad who, he's from Kingston, Jamaica. He's Jamaican. He passed away, and I had a very visceral dream where I was visited by him, and I felt like I was talking to him, and that like he told me that he had passed away, but not to be sad and stuff. And the next day I got like a phone call about him, and I miss him a lot. But I totally believe that this person saw their grandfather after he passed. I don't know, I just can see they must have seen something, and I really like that the trusted family doctor was validating to this person. The next one is called The Medium. My family told me this. I had fever very often when I was young. The medicines didn't help. One day, a stranger on the street asked my mom if I was always sick and who was the elderly woman following me. My mom was confused as there was no elderly woman nearby. I'm already upset. The stranger pointed into the air and described a dead paternal grandmother's look, the hairstyle and clothes she wore to her grave. My dad was from a different town, and my mom would have known it if the stranger was a mutual friend. The stranger instructed my dad to tell my grandmother to go back. My mysterious fever stopped. I'm glad that the medium pointed something out, but it's concerning to me that like having a visiting relative, like deceased relative, would cause someone to be feverish. That's really saddening to hear that. I always like hearing, well, clearly because I teared up a couple times today. I always like hearing when someone lovingly visits or is reassuringly visiting someone, or jokingly visits, like if they accidentally startle you or scare you but they like are jokey and it's true to who they were when you knew them on like this plane of existence. I always think that's really sweet, but also there are not nice people in this world, and they become potentially not nice entities. So that's really concerning to hear that like a visiting ancestor or relative can cause like a kid to be really feverish and sick feeling. The next one is called The Ghostly GPS. Got lost with girlfriend at night in Waco, Texas. Roads were deserted. No people, no cars. Then saw one lone person standing on the corner as I made a turn. I heard a friendly male voice in the vehicle, as if sitting in the back seat, say to me, "You're going the wrong way." I noticed I was, indeed, going the wrong way on a one-way street, so I did a U-turn. The road took me directly to the main highway. asked my girlfriend a bit later if she heard the voice too, and she burst into tears because she had been so freaked out by it, she thought she was going insane or something. Ooh. Well, thank you, sir, for not letting that couple drive the wrong way on a one-way. So that was very nice. Seeing a lone soul on a road, though, is very scary. Clearly, because I also did an episode about that. I'm just like one by one doing things that scare the hell out of me. Here's the last one I'm going to be reading. This one's titled, "And Finally, the Experience That Has an Explanation But Still Scared the Pants Off of Someone." When I was around 16, my rapidly growing family finally moved from the house I had spent my entire life in. As you would expect, we spent a lot of time fondly remembering things we used to do in the house as we were packing everything up. At one point, I decided to go into the downstairs closet with a flashlight and read, something I used to do when I was younger to get some peace and quiet. Now, this is one of those deep closets that goes under the stairs. It went back around 8 feet and then had a left turn into a very low, maybe 3-foot high space. This space was largely occupied by a mountain of old blankets and stuffed animals. Of course, this is the most fluffy spot to sit and read. About an hour in, I shift a little to get comfortable, and I hear a low, slow, warped, hoarse voice say, "You always make me happy." I flipped my shit, hit my head on the low ceiling, and practically broke the door down getting out. After hyperventilating and explaining to my family why there was no color left on my face, I went back to see what it was. It was my stuffed little bear from when I was 3 or 4 years old. Aw, little bear, that I happened to lean on just right to press his little belly. When I pressed his stomach again, though, nothing. This poor bear I hadn't played with since I was a toddler used the last of its power, used its dying breath to tell me I made it happy. You make me happy too, little bear, when you're not making me piss myself. That was a great one to end on. That was really cute. Aw. I'm really thankful that you sat with me on this Hallows Eve around the campfire to listen to some of these tales. Now I think it's time to cast a little spell. So I'll, of course, leave this post or this blog post in the description because there are other spells listed here. But I wanted to do the one about the Halloween spell to protect your home. And this one kind of relates to, the episode where we talked about where the jack-o'-lantern comes from and how protective they are. So if you have a jack-o'-lantern that you've carved, whether you're using like a fake tea light or a regular candle or whatever's safest for you, if you wait until dusk and light the candles in the pumpkins, then you are supposed to recite this charm. Pumpkin, please protect my home from roof tile down to founding stone. Windows, doors, and all between. Guard this place on Halloween. This spell protects my home and me. As I will it, so must it be. You can also do this with candles that you light in your home, but just, of course, make sure that you blow out candles before you go to bed. I know also from the Halloweeny episode, you can use chrysanthemums are very important, but also marigolds are as well. And there's many types of flowers that are ways to protect your house. But if you'd like to do something more floral, you can put some flowers in a vase. Just make sure they're symbolic to whatever it is that you're trying to use as protection. And you put it near your door and you say, "A flower fascination I spin on this Halloween night. Keep spooks and specters far away, repel bad luck from my sight. Hear my words and let the magic flow both hither and yon. This spell will last and ward my home until the break of dawn." Also, you can always think of loved ones who have passed And today is just such like a wonderful day to think of their memories. Think about animals that have been in your life that have passed, and think about how maybe they're closer, if you believe in this kind of thing, of course, but maybe they're closer tonight because the veil is thin. And so just like honoring them with their memories. And I think that's just a beautiful way to like commemorate their life and what a beautiful legacy they've left. I have loved spending Halloween with you. This has been such a cool way to spend it. I think this is awesome, and I really appreciate your time and that you sat around the campfire with me, and that we got to talk about scary things and funny things and sometimes melancholy things. And I hope that you have a really safe and fabulous Halloween night. Happy Halloween! Thanks to all you spooky souls out there for listening to Creepycore and Folklore. Follow on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok if you're looking for more uncanny content. If you have your own tales to tell, you can email creepycoreandfolklore@gmail.com. If you liked this, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, or tell a friend who might enjoy these stories to spread the word. If you're interested in dark fantasy, check out my Hollowverse series. Ashes is available now in paperback and ebook on Amazon and audiobook on Audible, and the sequel is underway. I'm Iona Wayland, and I'll see you next time.